Are you ready to land your dream consulting or corporate strategy job? On the Management Consulted Job Board, we've made it easier than ever. Create your free job search profile today and instantly unlock access to hundreds of top-tier job opportunities, all at no cost to you. Want to stand out even more? Premium users through our Black Belt program get the ultimate edge by being featured in an exclusive resume book shared directly with top consulting firms like Huron, Simon Kucher, LEK, and more. So why wait? Start your journey toward your dream career now through the Management Consulted Job Board. Your future in consulting is just a click away. Find the link to create your profile today in the show notes below.
Are you preparing for a BCG case interview or any other type of case interview at Bain, McKinsey, or other firms? Well, then this case episode today is a fantastic demonstration of what to expect in your interviews. In this episode, case coach Yusuf, who is also a former BCG consultant, starts our candidate off with a standard walk me through your resume question before diving into a fun BCG style market entry case. The case has everything that you can expect in a BCG style case interview. Make sure to listen all the way to the end as Yusuf walks through specific feedback on the case for the candidate, on key areas for improvement, growth areas, and much more. Did you know that you can purchase coaching hours to have Yusuf guide you through the case prep process? Well, you can. Links in the show notes to see our packages. Typically, how Yusuf works with candidates one-on-one is he'll start off with a diagnostic case to assess your strengths and weaknesses before moving into drill-based practice and full mock interviews to make sure that you're ready to consistently crush your cases and land the consulting offer. Again, links in the show notes to learn more about Yusuf, connect with him, and get coaching to work with him. All right, let's get into this BCG case interview demonstration.
Matthew, welcome to BCG. We're excited to have you here today. Before we get into the case, I've had a quick look over your resume. Can you spend maybe a minute or two and bring it to life for me?
Absolutely. Okay, so I began my life pre-med, and I didn't really want to do anything other than just being a doctor and seeing patients. However, I took a healthcare management course at our business school, and I realized that there was a whole nother world of healthcare which surrounds the cost of it. And so I began working as a project manager or an analyst for a direct primary care startup. And what direct primary care is that we believe that health insurance in the US is too complicated. And so we want to cut health insurance out of the provider-patient relationship. And so I started doing some work looking into markets in direct primary care. It's a new field, and what type of services we could use to differentiate our product from other areas. And I have a variety of other experiences, particularly with quality metrics and data structuring, because healthcare data is very messy. And so that is kind of the bulk of my resume. Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. Really, really excited to meet you and run through this case. I think we're going to borrow a little bit of the skills that you've developed so far going into this. Cool. So let's get into this. Matthew, are you ready for this?
Let's do it.
Cool. Our client is a startup electric vehicle manufacturer that has built a prototype all-electric vehicle, and they're interested in mass producing it for the US market. BCG has been hired to help them think about this opportunity. Can you develop some questions to delve deeper into this issue?
Absolutely. Okay. EV manufacturer prototype. All right. Just to understand this case a little bit more thoroughly, I'd like to ask what type of EV are they particularly making the entire vehicle? So, for example, like Tesla, or are they making some sort of part? Just to get an understanding of where this business stands.
They intend producing the full vehicle, so closer to a Tesla.
Okay, wonderful. All right, yeah. So, off the top of my head, some questions to ask I would like to understand, first of all, is our client interested in anything else other than entering into the US market, or are there any other objectives?
Their primary objective is entering the US market.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. So some first questions I would like to understand are, what is their experience in entering markets right now? Where are they located, for example, and what is their experience in that market? You said they had a prototype option for this EV, so I was wondering, what type of customer segmentation were they planning to market to? So is it like a low-level CV? Is a EV? Is it a mid-size market, or like a very high-end vehicle? And so these would be some examples of questions I would start when determining if they should enter into the US market. But I would love to make a framework and everything like that.
Sure, sounds good. So let's go into it. Can you take me through a potential framework for how to think about these different questions?
Absolutely. So could you give me 30 seconds to go through a framework real quick?
Sure,
Prepare a framework. Thank you.
Looking for consulting firms that are hiring can be like trying to find a needle in a huge haystack. That's why we're excited to tell you about Palmtree, a leading M&A advisory and consulting firm that is looking for top talent across its US offices in Los Angeles, Chicago, Detroit, and Dallas. Palmtree is a firm that sits at the intersection of strategy, finance, and analytics. The firm looks like a traditional consulting firm for the outside, but it's much more than that, functioning as a one-stop shop to support private equity clients. Palmtree is the single source for financial consulting and investment banking. If you're looking to develop a unique skill set, receive world-class training, and work for a dynamic firm, apply to Palmtree today. Visit the careers page at palmtreellc.com or click on the link in this episode's show notes.
All right. I think I'm ready and prepared to go through my framework. So I would like to start with understanding more about this startup company. So obviously, I'm not assuming that they're very large at this point, but I would like to have a grasp of, do we have any current revenues as of right now? And if so, what do they look like? And then also, I'd like to understand, based off my experience in a startup, the actually management and the vision of what this startup is trying to accomplish is very important. So I would like to know more about, this particular startup, what is their motivation for going into the EV industry? Is it sustainability? Is it, high tech? What is really their North Star in this getting this market? And then experience in EVs. It's maybe do they have people that already understand the engineering process behind that, or are they more interested in the distribution channels? What exactly are they looking for in asking BCG, other than just entering the U.S. market? How can we help them more collectively and holistically? And then the last thing is understanding what their target market is. Again, kind of, are they looking for something more affordable? Are they looking for something high tier? That'll change the way that we're looking at profit and if US market is attractive to them. The second thing I would like to look at is the overall industry. So you said that they were interested in the US market. So currently I would look at, what is the EV, the size of the EV market in the US. But if necessary later in the case, I would also like to look at just the total global market. If this startup is not located in the US, maybe there might be other opportunities elsewhere in other countries. And then dividing the US market further, we could look at, those different, just getting an understanding of the US market would be helpful in the beginning. The last bucket I would like to look at is just general customer feedback. So we have a prototype right now. Do they have a product market fit already? Do we have customers that already are intending to, pre-order the product? What is it that they like about this product? And what is it that makes them feel like the US market would be, the best place to go or attractive place to go? So those would be my three main buckets. And I would like to start with understanding the company size a little bit more.
Sure. So this is a useful framework. The clients looked at this and actually decided to speak a little bit to the first bucket that you mentioned around the company context, and a little bit more about the product. So they've shared some information with us around the product. The vehicle that they're intending to create, the prototype, is a light-duty, all-electric truck. They've manufactured 3 identical prototype vehicles to date. It requires minimum manufacturing capabilities. The current manufacturing facility is little more than a large R&D lab. And the client hopes to sell this in the US market nationwide. The client would like to produce 150,000 vehicles in year 1. And while the retail selling price has not yet been determined, they are likely to sell it between the 35 to 50,000 US dollar range. How would you think about the potential market for this vehicle? That is the market segments in the US for this vehicle.
Absolutely. Okay. So I'd just like to recap a little bit. They're doing a light duty, all electric truck, and they brought us 3 identical prototypes. Could you go into a little bit more about why they're bringing us 3 identical prototypes? Is it just...
So this is what they've manufactured so far.
Okay.
So this is a result of basically the R&D efforts of the 3 prototypes that they've been able to produce.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. So they want to distribute it nationwide, 150,000 years. Okay. All right. So the question right now is to divide the US market, correct?
Correct. Specifically around the specific market segments that they could consider targeting.
Market segments they can consider targeted. Wonderful. Okay. All right. So off the bat, I would like to start off at particular market segments. I would like to start off with the total car/truck market. Well, since we're doing trucks, maybe the total truck market. There may be customers, even if they're using gasoline or diesel trucks, they might be interested in going into electric vehicle in the future. And so just getting a size of the potential scope that we could have. So the first segment would be truck buyers. And then the second segment would, and this would be individual truck buyers. So at the consumer level, individuals. The second segment would be, if we're dealing with trucks, there are a lot of companies that utilize, vans or trucks, and they have their logos on them for, distribution or advertising or operations. So I would be wondering, what is the company or business the market segment allocated to those operational vehicles? So for example, government, for example, business. Okay, so operational vehicles. And then I think those would be my 2 main buckets for how I would segment the market so far.
Cool. So basically it's B2C, so the consumer, and then B2B for the business segment. In terms of the B2C, so considering the consumer market, how would you segment out the consumer market? And then specifically, where would you see specific opportunity or potential for our client in terms of an all-electric vehicle within the proposed price point?
Okay, so we're looking for opportunity for EVs. I would like to look at first the total EV market as of last year, whatever data that we have available. So we would do total EV market. And then I would look at the growth rate, also the transfer rate of persons going from gasoline or diesel to EV. Because if we have an estimation of how this market will grow or how they will steal size from the other market, then we can have a more realistic expectation when we decide to bring this startup product to market. So total EV market, and then their growth rate. If we have any data on how much of the gasoline diesel market they're stealing per year, that'd be great. And then I would go closer into the EV market and then delineate that into, cars. So for example, your Teslas, your Models Ts, and then you would look at also trucks, because I think this Tesla also has like an interesting Cybertruck. I'm looking for how large is that truck EV market for our penetration.
So that gives us the overall sizing. However, our client is more interested in the segmentation. So in terms of the first bucket that you described, the consumer segment, how would you think about segmenting the consumer segment specifically?
Could you clarify why what I'm giving is not the? I understand that we're looking for something different. I'm just trying to understand what we're looking for.
So ideally, if our client were to go to market with their vehicle, who would they target in terms of consumers? Would they target older people in a lower income group, as an example, older people, younger people in a high income group? That's sort of the types of segments that they're looking to understand.
Wonderful. So a kind of customer profile, correct?
Well, overall customer segments first, and then deeper, once we have a couple of different segments, we can then dive deeper into a specific profile.
Understood. Okay. So because our car is looking at about 35 to 50,000 per vehicle, and we are an EV, I would assume that this would be your kind of mid market car. So probably not the persons with the necessarily lower side of the income, but maybe more the middle class of Americans. So middle class. And then also, higher class if they're interested, if we're able to produce some sort of luxury differentiator for the electric vehicle, that would be something to consider. But right now, I would assume middle class income for that customer. As for more demographics, this is a truck, and so I'm not sure about the gender segmentation of the gender, but I'm assuming that this would cater to a more male audience, and so that would be something to consider. And car buyers typically, I'm assuming, are more male. Truck buyers, I'm sorry. And then additionally, another thing to consider is that because it's an EV, and this is kind of the tech, the more modern, state-of-the-art, I would assume that our buyers would also be of the younger demographic. There may be some older ones that like the luxury and the feel of it, but that would be more of a high-end market, and I'm not sure that at our price point we would be focusing on that market. So younger, male, and middle income.
Well, are there any other elements that you'd split the consumer population by? So you've described you've described a little bit of specific demographic data, but are there any other elements that you'd consider?
Let's see.
You can consider an electric vehicle. How would that be powered versus how a conventional internal combustion vehicle is powered?
Right. Okay. So I would assume that we would have a specific type of charger, most likely for this electric vehicle. I'm not sure if we would have just the outlet, and so I would assume that this would be in a metropolitan area that we would be focusing on, and not necessarily the rural areas. Metropolitan, and then that's the other category that I could consider. But please let me know if go ahead.
Sounds good. So, our client understands the market. They consider the market to be quite attractive, and their objective is to build 150,000 vehicles. The key question they have for us for now is how many employees will they require to build in their first year, the production of 150,000 vehicles. They've shared with us some information around this. Each vehicle requires approximately 600 unique assembly steps. Each step can take around 30 seconds. And the average employee works 10 hours per day, 50 hours per week, and 50 weeks per year.
10 hours per day, 50 per week, 50 per year. Thank you for those values. Okay, so of course, when we're talking about employees, this is not administrative. We're just looking at pure manufacturing, this area of the company, correct?
Correct.
All right, wonderful. So to start off, we have 600 unique steps, and on average, each step takes about 30 seconds. So for one vehicle, we are going to require about 600 times 30. So that would be about 18,000 seconds per vehicle. And so I would like to then transfer that into hours. Translate, that's a better word for it. So we have 16,000 seconds. I'm going to divide it by 60 in order to get to the minutes. And so that would be 300 should be. And then I'm going to divide that again by 60 to get into the hours. So that would be about 5 hours of collective time for one vehicle. Now we have the amount of hours to vehicles. We need to go to employee hours to the vehicles. So every employee works 10 hours a day. So assuming that each employee could do theoretically all of the 600 steps, it would take one half of an employee to make one vehicle, or about two employees to make, or one employee to make two vehicles, or in a day, two vehicles could be made from one employee. There we go. Okay. So 2 vehicles per day per employee.
So consider the objective. The objective is a yearly number, right? We want to produce 150,000 vehicles in a year.
I see. Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Okay. So we want to produce 150 vehicles per year. And we know that it takes 150,000. Thank you. 150,000 vehicles per year. And we know it takes every day, one employee could make 2 vehicles. And so I'm going to, every day, one employee can make 2 vehicles. Let's make that into a yearly number. So if every day they can make 2 vehicles in 1 year, assuming 50 days, so wait a second, 10 hours a day, then 50 per 10 hours a day, 50. Could you tell me the second stat that you told me? Was it?
Sure. So it's 50 hours per week. So an average employee works 50 hours per week.
Wonderful.
And they work 50 weeks in a single year.
Got it. Okay, cool. So 50 hours per week and then 50 per year. So 50 weeks per year. So that would come out to a total of 2,500 hours, right? 2,500 hours per year. And then we're assuming that it takes 5 hours for one vehicle for one employee. And so it would take a total, one employee in 1 year could produce, theoretically, 500 vehicles. Okay, one employee in 1 year. Okay, so now that we have this figure, I'm going to divide the 150,000 vehicles that we'd like per year by the 500 vehicles that we could make per year by one employee. And so this would come out to, well, it's just 500, which is 1/2 of 1,000. So you could do 300. 500, another way to think about it is 1/2 of 1,000. And since we need 150,000 of them, we can just instead double the number. It's some interesting math. I hope you're, okay. The final value is 300 3,000. 300. 1/2 of 1,000, 300. Right, 300 employees.
Okay. What do you consider this answer within the broader context of the stage of this business?
With assuming that this is since we only have a prototype, I'm assuming that we're a very young business and we probably do not have that many personnel on board. So hiring 300 employees and expecting them to already be at capacity or our expected capacity to produce this early on in 1 year is a bit ambitious. So I would definitely highlight this as a potential risk for the startup.
Okay. Within the broader context of a longer term plan, is there any other question that you may want to follow up with regarding this capacity number?
Sure. I think Where is our manufacturing plant? Just if we have an interest in the labor or the cost of labor, and then also the cost of distribution later, as well as the type of, you said there's 600 unique steps, but how, like, okay, there's 600 unique steps, but how difficult are each of these steps that we could determine, where in the labor market should we go to, China for manufacturing? Should we keep it domestic in the US? These are other types of questions that I would consider.
Sure. So that's a good segue into the last question that our client has, which is, what options should they consider for scaling up manufacturing? So assume they've started producing vehicles and they're now looking to mass manufacture or mass produce a vehicle. What are the different options that they have, and what could be some of the pros and cons for each of those options?
Absolutely. Could I have 30 seconds to list out some thoughts?
Sure.
Thank you. All right. So I would like to go through my thoughts. So the three example countries and categories that we could use for manufacturing, where we want to place our manufacturing hub, are the US, China or Southeast Asia, and Mexico. It's kind of a mix in the two. So for the US, our pros and advantages would be that we are close to the distribution channels that we would like to, the market that we would like to sell in, and also that we have highly trained labor. So we would be able to serve and all the steps that we would need, and it would be very easy to do so. Now, the cons of manufacturing in the US is that it's a lot more expensive, and also the US has more aggressive taxation policies and fiscal policies that we would need to consider in the overall cost of manufacturing, especially since we are a kind of mid-market 35 to 50,000 selling point per vehicle. So the second potential manufacturing area that I would like to consider is China or Southeast Asia more generally, because it is a little cheaper in terms of the manufacturing and labor costs. However, when it comes to distribution, shipping is going to be an issue, especially if our main market is going to be in the U.S. And then also we're not sure about the trained labor that we could garner from Southeast Asia. And then the last area that I would like to consider is Mexico, because it also has a growing automotive and manufacturing hub, and it is a lot closer to the U.S. The only thing that I could really think about is I'm not familiar with Mexico's ability with trained labor, and then also their geographic constraints in terms of distribution and supply chain of steel and whatnot. So that's a kind of a mystery market, but I did think that it was a good idea to consider.
Cool. So assuming the client has decided to build their own manufacturing facility in the US, what are some strategies that they could use to reduce their costs?
All right, strategies to reduce cost. Well, first, considering strategies to reduce cost in the US. Well, we could partner with other manufacturing plants, especially if they're already doing EV vehicle manufacturing, kind of get that synergy and economies of scale effects going on. Another way that we could reduce cost is by maybe, a way we could reduce cost is potential. I don't know if they want to manufacture in the US. We could cross-train workers. So, for example, maybe the 600 steps, some of them are more similar to others. We can have certain employees specialize in those 600 steps and be able to get efficiencies from that. Other ways is through technology. What of these 600 steps are able to be automated if they're not already? And what type of initial fixed cost of investment will we need in order to produce those efficiencies later downstream? So those would be some potential ideas of reducing cost.
Cool. Sounds good, Matthew. That brings us to the end of the case. How did you find it?
I think I was very, at some points I was definitely more scattered and I was speaking really fast. And I understand that you were speaking a lot more, at a moderate pace. And so I wish if I could go back to do something different was think a little bit more thoroughly. Obviously you have the pressure of the case, but getting more comfortable in that tempo would be amazing. Yeah.
Cool. So let's dive into some feedback. I threw in the elevator pitch question up front just to see how you'd respond. So I really liked it. It was a great different way to present yourself. My feedback there is in any of the roles, if you consider any of your past work experiences, you speak a lot to sort of the technical skills that you've built, but it would be great to also emphasize some of your softer skills that you developed as well. You know, working with teams, working with different people, working with decision makers. That's really a skill that you want to be able to elevate, part of what makes you different, right? So that's some quick feedback on your resume, but I really enjoyed it. Then let's jump into the case. So, all in all, I think you did well in this case, where you felt confident. So there were certain parts of the case where you felt confident. You were able to think through the question. You intentionally asked for time to structure your thoughts, and then you presented your thoughts back. And specifically, you did that in sort of the first question. When we ran through the math, you worked through a structure. When we looked at the different manufacturing options, you thought a little bit about the structure. Whereas in some of the questions, when it came to segments and potentially the US option, you sort of dive straight into an answer. And that was sort of the split of generally where you'll see my feedback going. So in terms of the structure up front, I guess it was a tale of two stories. At first, you sort of gave me a very quick structure, and then I prompted you, you paused, and then you thought through all of the three buckets, considering all of some of the earlier questions that you had mentioned up front, and then you brought it into the structure. So generally, the best practice is one, always just restate the question. So here you asked clarifying questions, which is always a good thing. It's generally your second step, which is restate the question, ask any clarifying questions. That's typically what you want to be able to do. But you really want to make sure that you're answering the right question in the first place, which is why restating the question is important. Even if you just do it as a sanity check before you dive into any other questions. So that's sort of the first piece that was a little missing. The second piece that was a little bit missing was typically when you're developing a structure is you had gone straight into the questions, but you want to develop the structure first. So develop your structure before sort of giving some of your initial thoughts, because if you develop your initial thoughts and you share that up front, it seems almost like a half-baked answer, like you haven't fully thought through it. So before the interview prompting you to actually think to the structure, formulate your structure first. Formulate a framework for you to deliver your answer. Take that 30 seconds or a minute to do that. But when it came for you to actually deliver your structure, when I prompted it, you were really good in doing that. And I really liked three buckets, and I think it was mutually exclusive, and I think it covered the important points. As you work through cases, you'll start to consider things like risk factors. So that might be an important bucket to add on. But these are some of the additional ones that, as you get through more reps, you'll introduce more factors into your framework. Generally, then, when it comes to the framework, you want to pick a starting point. So you did well in picking that starting point, and you want to show a little bit of depth in that as well. So typically when you're picking a starting point, it's, hey, this is the point that I want to start with. These are some of the data points that I'd be interested in. Do you have any data points relating to X that you could share, as an example? So that's typically the best practice, because one, you're not just showing structure, but you're also showing depth in delivering your answer. So, upfront, you're showing that you're attentively listening, which is a big part of consulting. It's a big part of being successful in your first few months as a consultant. But then two, you're showing structure, which is an important skill that you want to be coachable and you want to develop. And then it's showing depth, and that's really an opportunity for you to show off your problem solving skills. Cool. When it came to the second part, which is the segments, Here, I think you had the right idea in mind in terms of taking the market and figuring out where the different pockets of value are. But here, it wasn't so much sizing the US market for EVs in general, as much as it was identifying the segments that could be attractive for our client, given the specific thing that they were selling, right? So, when I prompted you, we then got into some of the demographic information, but you can think of, there's a couple of different things that are important, right? So there is income segment, there's demographic data, male, female, age group is an example. There's geographic data, right? So rural versus urban. Access or distance from electric charging points. There's all of these different metrics over and above sort of your bread and butter metrics that you want to be bringing in. And this step, actually, when you talk about segments, or generally when you think about market segments, is really how you can differentiate yourself when it comes to a market sizing question. After you get through a few reps of doing market sizing, it becomes sort of something you're able to do from the back of your hand. But candidates who really differentiate themselves when going through the MBB recruitment process and when they're doing market sizing questions are candidates who are able to apply the very specific nuance of the case to the structure and the framework that they build when they go through the actual market sizing or segmentation framework. So really going into, access to charging points is an important one. Servicing of the vehicle and distance to local dealerships. Local regulation or requirements around all electric vehicles. Are there subsidies in some places where this could be cheaper versus there aren't subsidies in other states where it would make it more expensive? So, for example, California might be more attractive than a state where there aren't rebates in place that could incentivize the purchase. Those are some of sort of the second level insights that you can surface as part of a segmentation or market sizing question. When it came to the math, you were pretty good at the math. I think a month into it, I was impressed. You do what I think a lot of candidates do, which is sometimes you second guess your math. So when you're on the right path, I think you got to 300 number of employees. You got to that number pretty soon, right? But you double checked yourself a couple of times, and at a certain few points, I was worried. Hey, are you actually going to change your answer and go from the right answer to the wrong answer? So sometimes it's part of building confidence through the process is having confidence in your math ability, right? Like we were working with round numbers. It was relatively simple math. You proved it through the time that you took to get this done. My feedback a little bit is always try and link your workings to the end output. So if you think of the end output, it was number of cars divided by number of hours to build a car. So you always want to be working back to number of hours. And in a year, sort of, we were working with that 1 year metric. So initially you started your answer with, it'll take one employee, they can build 2 cars in a day. How many could they build in a year? Whereas rather we had the numbers of one employee, 50 hours in a day, 50 hours in a year. So when I sort of brought you back to that framework, you were able to then very quickly solve that equation. So always keep in mind the end denomination of how the answer or how the answer needs to be structured. So in this case, it was around number of cars, number of hours, number of employees. Those are sort of the 3 numbers you need to get to. In a different case, it might be a cross-border M&A case. There might be, a specific scenario where it's 2 different currencies. But the interviewer might need you to believe, hey, everything needs to be in US dollars as opposed to Japanese yen. So you want to be almost from the start of your case, working your answer, working your sort of calculations into US dollars. So it makes your resulting calculations very easy to do to get to an end answer in US dollars. That's sort of the thing that you choose. Just keep the units of measurement or the denomination in mind as you walk through the case. And then, in terms of the last two sections of the case, one was around the manufacturing options and then the pros and cons. You did really well to outline sort of the one big decision is manufacture locally or manufacture abroad, right? So you said US, and then you mentioned a few countries outside of the US. However, there was a second vector, which is manufacture yourself or outsource your manufacturing. So that was sort of the only piece missing. And you actually led into it when we spoke about the second question, which is if we want to build this in the US, part of your answer was maybe we can partner with an existing manufacturer or someone else who also produces it. So you almost weaved a little bit of what the answer was into an answer at the end. But my advice here is a little bit, in both of these last two questions, you went straight into the answer. Whereas it's fine to take that 30 seconds, to take that minute, structure your thoughts first. And as you say, this is where you got lost a little bit in your thoughts, going straight into the answer. The best remedy is if in doubt, pause, ask for 30 seconds. The worst thing your interviewer can do is say no. And if they say no, still speak slowly and work through the answer. It does two things when you speak slowly. One, it gives you an opportunity to still build a framework in your mind. And then two is it allows you to still think through your answer as you speak to your answer. So that would be sort of my key advice for you. But in general, and coming back to it, I observed great structure. I observed good problem solving. I observed a lot of depth. I really enjoyed the depth that you went into some of the factors to consider when building or manufacturing, the different ways you can size the market, the different factors that are important, fuel to EV as an example. I really liked that. Like that was an interesting way to connect this specific case to the larger industry that the client might operate in. So coming back to it, you would have probably made it through a typical first round interview, but for a second round, the specifics around structure, the specifics around thinking through and showing a little bit of depth, and then also pausing and responding. Those would be sort of my key pieces of feedback for how to improve for your next round.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. When you started the case, the thing you prompted was the questions to ask when entering in the US market. So that kind of caught me off guard because I said, oh, he's asking for questions, not necessarily a framework. So we should be comfortable that, I'm asking you, should we be comfortable with, even if you say questions to ask, you're really asking for us to take time, restate the question, then go through a framework? Okay.
Exactly. And if I just think back to due diligences, a lot of what MBBs do, due diligence is basically a long list of questions, but those questions are very clearly sort of structured and bucketed. And those buckets are then split between team members and you tackle those questions sort of one by one. So exactly as you say, when in doubt, structure. Always go back to structure and framework.
Wonderful.
Thanks for listening to this BCG style case led by case coach Yusuf. If you've got ideas for a future podcast or you'd like to feature yourself on an episode or even volunteer for a live case such as what you just listened to, please reach out team@managementconsulted.com. One more thing, if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a rating, review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really does help the show reach more listeners. All right, have a great Thanksgiving and we'll catch you again next week.